Hello and welcome to this James the Bike Guy, where today we're getting to take a look at an absolutely wild and crazy new frame design from Specialized, a bike that might be the most innovative or at least groundbreaking in the way a bike looks since, well, probably the age-old soft ride. Well, anyways, this is not a road bike or some high-end mountain bike. Instead, this is the Specialized Sirrus X. And the Sirrus X itself is a do-it-all gravel and all-road hybrid bike, and a pretty cool bike for them to be debuting an absolutely wild frame design. Well, anyways, I'm pretty interested in checking this out, and I can't wait to talk to you about this bike. So be sure to hit subscribe and browse with me while we check out this bike together. Now let's get the elephant out of the room while we take a look at this bike. What is going on here? Now, in Specialized lineup, they've got two hybrid bikes. Both bikes are what are called the Sirrus. Now, this particular one being the Sirrus X means that it's set up with more gravel-oriented tires, but it's going to share the same wild frame as the new Sirrus 6.0 fitness style hybrid. And in the lineups, these two bikes come in at the absolute top end with a carbon fiber frame made out of what they call their 9R carbon. So if we look at this absolutely beautiful frame, the finishing on it is pretty dang cool. Of course, threaded bottom brackets and through axles, all the stuff you would expect on a high-end road bike or mountain bike. But instead of focused after a performance rider, this is really a bike to help draw in somebody who's looking for an interesting and very cool looking bike to use for their fitness rides, or maybe is new to the sport. Now this, of course, coming in at $2,250 is no cheap bike, but when you put that in perspective to what people pay for fitness equipment, for gym memberships and things like that, it's really not as wild as you would think, especially for somebody who's looking at this as a replacement for, say, that Peloton in their house. And I think that's part of why Specialized has come with this really cool frame design. Now, on the aluminum versions, the levels below this, they run a traditional double diamond frame. That's where you have a triangle in the front, a triangle in the rear, and that's sort of an age-old, timeless way to put together a bike. But instead here, a much more angular frame shape, and it has what they're calling a compliance junction. Effectively, what Specialized is claiming with the design of this bike is that seat stay going up, which would typically go much more straight up to the seat tube, instead going across, and then your seat tube mounted up and going down to the down tube is going to allow that compliance junction, that kind of circle right there that I'm going around, that is supposed to allow more of a leaf spring-like compliance to the bike. That means the seat tube itself has a little bit of flex down, a little bit of side-to-side flex, and it does that without having too much of that rearward motion where the nose of the saddle would be coming up. All that's to say that Specialized is claiming that this should allow for a much more compliant and comfortable ride compared to more of a traditional diamond-like frame. So I believe that that's probably true, although Specialized is also dousing this up with a couple other cool features that should help out as well. Most mainly, this has the Future Shock 1.5, and what that is where they suspend the handlebar by 20 millimeters. So if you press down on this, you can see that the head tube itself can flex, and instead of having the wheel flex up and down, it's suspending the rider just like that compliance junction is, which should allow the bike to carry speed and keep going pretty quickly without having that bobbing feeling up and down. Now, a lot of people compare that to the old school Cannondales that used to have a head shock but on top of the fork crown and below your head tube. And that works like a traditional bike where the front end will bob up and down when you're really standing up and getting on those pedals. But because both the front wheel and the rear wheel are fixed in this frame, you're not going to have that efficiency loss. So Specialized combines up that compliance junction with 20 millimeters of suspension up front, which I should mention comes with 3 different springs. So you can go low, medium, and firm. That's going to allow you to dial in how it feels up front. But then out back, one of the things that I think is a little bit of a miss is this bike has an aluminum seat post. I would imagine this would have been a place, especially on a nice bike like this, that you could have gone to a carbon fiber seat post to make it just that much more compliant. Now, further out from that, I said that the Sirrus and the Sirrus X both rock the same frame, which is true, but where one of the big differences comes in is going to be in the tire format. Now, both bikes can run up to a 42C tire without fenders and a 38C tire with fenders. And on the X version of the bike, comes with these Pathfinder Pro tires, a nice hybrid style tire with a little bit of tread on the side. I've run these on gravel bikes and I really like this tire. And this particular tire being nice and fat at 38C should help with some of that compliance as well. Now that's mounted up on a 700C alloy rim that's going down through axle, center lock hubs, front and the rear, and out back is going to be another place where there's a slight drivetrain difference. Now both bikes are going to come with a 1x12 drivetrain. So this has a single ring up front, this SRAM aluminum crankset, and then out back is a NX 12-speed rear derailleur. That 12-speed is going through an 11 to 50 tooth rear cassette, and on the Sirrus 6.0, the non-all gravel, all road setup, it's going to be a GX setup, which is going to get you a much nicer cassette, and then it runs a slightly larger front chainring. Basically, the difference is that Sirrus expecting to always be on pavement, whereas this, being the Sirrus X, where it would go on-road or off, they're changing the gearing ratio just a touch to be able to make the bike be a bit faster on-road, whereas this bike has a bit more compliance off-road. We've got a couple of really cool things as far as where stuff can get mounted on the bike. So here on the top tube, we've got mounts for a top tube bag. You could also put a water bottle there if you wanted to. In the frame, you do still, on mediums and larges, get a down tube and a seat tube water bottle mount. And then of course, just in front of the bottom bracket is a spot for another water bottle mount as well. Now, of course, I'm sure you're thinking a little bit, well, with this crazy frame design, can you even put a rack on this and use it as a commuter? And luckily, yes, you can. Although it is a specific rack just to the Specialized Sirrus, but I do like that it uses the MIC standard for the nice mounting setup that's universal across all different types of bags. Last things to mention on the bike before we get to the weight is the handlebar here is a nice flat bar. It does have one of these adaptable stems where you can add mounts for your lights or your bicycle computer, whatever you're carrying. The grips themselves are an ergonomic profile that kind of goes into the cup of your hand when you grab onto it. You do have a thumb and a thumb button to go to a harder gear, and then the brakes are done courtesy some Tektro 2-piston calipers, both on the front and the rear. And the actual weight of the Sirrus X 5.0 comes in and weighs 25.9 pounds in a size medium. Thanks so much for joining me to check out this Specialized Sirrus X 5.0.